This is A Savage in the Future. Written by Craig A. Falconer. Narrated by Stephen Barnett. Chapter 1. I know this is going to be hard to believe. Hell, I'm having a hard time convincing myself I'm not crazy. At the end of the longest day of my life, I'm writing this down so the truth can survive if anything happens to me. I've dated the corner of the page, so you'll know when this is coming from, whether you'll believe it or not. But I have no idea when these words might be read. That's the thing with time. There's always one uncertainty or another. There's always something we don't know. Even now, there are all kinds of things I don't know. But before I get into what happened, the first thing you need to know is why I did it. It started with a text message. My public profile as a journalist means I'm a pretty easy man to find. Sure, there are a lot of Alex Whites in the world, but I've built enough of a platform to make sure I show up near the top of the search list. The message was very simple. Chronotonic Security Insider offering full access, no risk. 5 a.m. on demonstration day. Cost $4K, deadline 4 hours. No questions either way. I was half asleep when the message came in, but you'd better believe I jumped out of bed right away. The first surprise was that the sender's number wasn't hidden. I've built up a good circle of contacts in the past few years. That comes in handy at times like this, and I quickly called in a favor from a cop who I've helped out a bunch of times. He ran the number without asking what this was all about, trusting me enough to know that I wouldn't be caught up in anything serious, and that I wouldn't keep anything of public interest from the police department. Within minutes, I had a name and full profile on the sender. Sure enough, he was a security guard at the Chronotonic building downtown. He had no criminal record. The only thing of note that we could find online was a crowdfunding campaign he just launched for his wife's medical bills. The fundraising goal? $4,000. Just like his asking price for granting illicit access to a restricted area. That was enough for me to know that the guy was legit. He needed the money and could only think of one way to get it. And I knew that if his offer was real, this would be a win-win situation. We could argue until the cows come home about the ethics of a guy selling out his employer like that. But, by the same token, we could argue about the ethics of a society that leaves a hard-working guy feeling like he has no other choice. None of that is what counts, though. I will say that I think a corporation like Chronotonic deserves as much of our sympathy as an infectious disease, but that's just me. And again, not what counts. It's just that a little bit of scene setting is necessary here. From my standpoint, I had no ethical hang-ups about taking the guy up on his offer. I had some financial hang-ups, but I was able to rustle up the $4,000 by maxing out a few cards. I'd been running into brick wall after brick wall lately, with no major scoops or exposés in far too long. I wouldn't say I was ever a star, so let's just say my name was fading. When I get approached for comments or talking head appearances, it's always for some topic relating to the series of articles I did on corporate irresponsibility a few years ago. I spoke to small farmers and vintners who were having problems caused by the big players riding roughshod over environmental regulations. One of the stories in particular gained a lot of steam. It ended up with some major traction when it turned out there was governmental corruption tied into the corporate recklessness. Coming at a time when everyday people were starting to feel helpless about the state of the planet, that kind of story really resonated. I was working for a big newspaper back then. The problem was, they took the story away from me and passed it upstairs so bigger names could cash in on my groundwork. You can call me stubborn or petulant, and say I should have understood that everyone has to respect the hierarchy and pay their dues. But I quit on the spot. I also managed to get myself blacklisted from the industry by publicly calling out my old bosses for doing the dirty on me. Apparently, the old guard still sticks together, So I found myself trying to make it as an independent journalist just as the AI scrapers and algorithmic feeds were kicking in to make that career so much harder than it used to be. So yeah, that's why I responded to the text. I had to. It's incredible how so much can turn on one tiny decision. I've heard it said that small actions can echo through time. And believe me, that's never been truer than in the case of what happened next. Chapter 2. It was the only choice I could make. This isn't guilt talking. I just know that a questionable action like this needs a solid justification, let alone when the stakes were so high. What you have to understand is that my career was going nowhere fast. This was my last big swing. Losing $4,000 to a scam or a nothing burger of a story would sting like hell, but it wouldn't kill me. The upside, though, could save my career. That was my thinking, and the decision made itself. Well, I guess there was a little bit more to it than that. I had some deep-seated doubts about Chronotonic's claims in the build-up to their big presentation. I actually had a press invite to the presentation, since they like to paint their whole crazy enterprise as an ecologically motivated pursuit. Their ads talk about standing at the forefront in the search for green solutions to modern problems. Some stuff I've written has earned me kudos in environmental activist circles, which are exactly the kind of circles Chronotonic wants to convince of its green credentials. That's why I was already going to be in the building for the big public reveal of the worst-kept secret in history. And, more pertinently, it also ties into why I opted to gamble $4,000 in the hope of getting in several hours early to see behind the scenes. Chronotonic's parent company has been heavily involved in clean energy research for a long time. They funded some studies I referenced in my dissertation, which slightly embarrassingly went viral during my more recent 5 minutes in the public eye. 5 years have passed since I wrote that. I was 18. I wouldn't put my name to a lot of it now. The most radical parts feel like they were written by someone else entirely, not just a younger version of myself. The impulse was pure, though, and I still think that curtailing reckless pollution and environmental degradation is one of the most important things we have to do. In hindsight, some of the hack-and-slash solutions I idealistically posited to correct the economy and society as a whole were way out there. But hey, I guess that's why teenagers don't run the world. I care about the planet in a way that I just don't believe Chronotonic's executives do. They talk a good game, but that's all it is. Talk. The company itself is only 2 years old, but its growth has been insane. It all kicked off during some closed-doors research into a potential way of harvesting zero-point energy. The experiments supposedly showed some promise, according to company sources I saw as unreliable, but everything had to stop very suddenly. Why? Well, if you were buying what they were selling, it was because some of their advanced instrumentation picked up anomalies that suggested locally concentrated fluctuations in the fabric of spacetime. The news leaked out, and Chronotonic was immediately born, first as a new division, and then a whole new company focused on unlocking the green potential of temporal manipulation. You know, time travel. Everyone scoffed at first, but when the venture capital started flowing in, it became an unstoppable cascade. What if it was possible? What if Chronotonic really could be on the verge of developing a proprietary method of manipulating time itself? That what if was enough. No one wanted to be left behind. Like my gamble with the $4,000, ground floor investment was a bet that a lot of investment funds felt like they couldn't afford not to make. A bet on Chronotonic was a lottery ticket to untold riches. Because if time travel was possible, whoever controlled it would control everything. Investors rushed in for fear of missing out, too scared of not being on board the time travel train, even if the rational parts of their minds said it was impossible. For 2 years, the hype grew and spiraled. My offer of illicit access to an off-limits area of Chronotonic HQ came just 3 days before their biggest ever public event. I responded within the 4-hour deadline and quickly got the necessary details for the exact meeting point and time. The guy wanted cash upon meeting, so that everything was as untraceable as possible, which further reassured me that it wasn't a scam. He could have easily asked for a cryptocurrency payment up front or something like that, and I would have had no choice but to take my chances. I was damn glad it didn't come to that. Instead, I psyched myself and withdrew the cash from a few different ATMs, one on each day before the event. The fact I withdrew it at all probably looks weird since I usually never withdraw anything, but I didn't want to make one sudden and maximal transaction that might be flagged as suspicious. With how little time I had and how much I was counting on this crazy plan working out, the last thing I needed was any kind of unwanted attention. By the time of the last stressful, sleepless, and migraine-filled night before the event, the hype had reached fever pitch. I had never seen anything like it. News anchors and commentators 3 times my age said that they hadn't either. Everyone felt sure that Chronotonic simply had to deliver. The executives and spokespeople were constantly talking up what was going to go down, and conventional wisdom held that they wouldn't be acting like that if they didn't really have something as big as they were claiming. Me? Well, I wasn't so sure. For one thing, time travel just struck me as a totally impossible pipe dream. My doubts had a broader basis than that, though. I knew that a lot of the people high up in Chronotonic had been involved in the corruption case I was trying to expose. They were the opposite of stand-up guys. Once the newspaper took the story away from me, certain details stopped being covered, and certain people got away scot-free. I was painted as a bitter young upstart with a grudge, so hardly anyone listened to what I had to say. That's water under the bridge, but it's part of why I just knew these people weren't to be trusted. Time after time, they stood up on their podiums and talked about protecting the planet and ensuring a safe world for future generations, but I didn't think they meant a word of it. They wanted a rich future for themselves, and that was all. I knew that even if they weren't overhyping the upcoming announcement, ecological concerns were the furthest thing from any of their minds. The name they chose was intended to give the opposite impression. The name Chronotonic came with a catchy tagline, too. Time is the tonic, so why wait? The basic pitch was that if they truly could find a way to go forward in time, they could discover solutions to the problems Earth is facing right now and solve them more quickly. Humanity could thus harness future technologies without living through the struggles of developing them, according to the marketing gurus. The whole thing was unprecedented. They weren't selling a product, for one thing, because it's not like they ever planned to put a time machine in every garage. They were selling an idea. They were selling a dream. To my mind, they were pursuing a way of generating as much money as possible without having to develop anything real. It had scam written all over it, and I wanted to get in there and expose that scam once and for all. And like I said, even if there was any substance to it, they wouldn't go forward in time to find solutions to environmental problems. They would do the corporate equivalent of betting on the Super Bowl results. Self-enrichment is all those people care about. I also had another concern about the dangerous precedent of thinking the future is going to solve all of our problems. Techno-optimism has been discussed by a lot of environmentalists. Some optimists essentially think we don't have to worry too much about what we're doing right now, because future technologies will soon come along to change our paradigms for the better. Tomorrow's technologies will solve tomorrow's problems, is the long and short of that position. So why worry about them today? Needless to say, talk of traveling into the future to find those solutions dialed this up to 11. A more tangible concern with solving today's problems is that a lot of grant money and public investments that should have gone towards real environmental issues over the past few years went to Chronotonic instead. Their huckstering wasn't just distracting attention away from tangible projects, it was diverting crucial funds. I couldn't stand by with a good conscience and ignore my chance to do something about that. From the very start, it all felt to me like one giant case of corporate welfare. Mountains of public money went into the hands of the executives and shareholders. Neither major political party objected to any of it either, because control of time travel is seen as a national security issue. The space race is so 20th century. For our generation, the time race is what matters. Before Chronotonic revealed anything beyond speculative designs, the whole country was rooting for it. Talk about a masterclass in public relations. My own prediction for the big event was that they would announce an intangible breakthrough and put a timeline on a public demonstration of a working prototype. The talking heads didn't think that would be enough to justify the hype, but I thought it would. Skillful marketers can build and keep attention by making announcements that turn out to be announcements of more announcements. It's a tale as old as time. After replying to the security guard's message and getting my final information, I didn't have to wait much longer. Even when the day arrived, my feelings stayed the same. I also figured Chronotonic would keep kicking the can down the road, announcing slight delays that would always be sugar-coated with supposed improvements. You know, telling everyone the tech would be even better than the last promises they made, but saying that making the changes would take a little bit of extra time. It would be worth the wait, they'd say. Because what's a little waiting when time itself is the prize? But me? I called bullshit. In understanding my decision, it doesn't matter whether I was right or wrong about that. So yeah, it's safe to say I had my reasons for doing what I did. I had a dying career that needed a scoop. I had long-held concerns about the environment and new ones about the effect Chronotonic's distracting pie-in-the-sky promises could have in delaying actual policies we could be enacting in the present. I won't even pretend I didn't have a personal grudge against some of Chronotonic's higher-ups. I think any of those single reasons might have been enough to accept the offer from a security guard on the take. Taken together, I really didn't even have to think about it. My gut told me they were either massively exaggerating or full-on lying about what they were capable of, and I thought my scoop would be an expose that could help me, help the planet, and help give those jerks a dose of overdue justice. That was why I did it. That was why I didn't arrive to take my assigned seat in the Chronotonic HQ's auditorium at the same time as everyone else. That was why I arrived early with an ulterior motive. I'm sure by now you can understand why I replied to the text and accepted the offer. That was a career move. In all honesty, in the position I was in, I would have followed a lead like that about something much less socially important. But as for what came next, well, more than concerns about my career carried me forward. It took a lot more than that to carry me forward for the final few steps. It was about the planet. It was about justice. It was about fulfilling the one drive I've never managed to fulfill. My drive to really make a difference in the world. Altogether, the full spectrum of reasons led me to hand over my $4,000 and follow the guard all the way into the building's inner sanctum, where my jaw dropped as I laid eyes on the device Chronotonic was about to publicly reveal. It couldn't be real. I just knew it couldn't be real. That knowledge also played a part in pulling me all the way. Because if I'd thought otherwise, I don't think any amount of social responsibility I felt could have made me do it. I just felt like I had to get close-up footage. I had to see for myself what they were going to be showing to the world. Their hollow charade couldn't go on any longer, and this was my one shot to end it all. So when the rest of the world was waiting eagerly for the big show, that was why I went all the way. That was why I did it. That was why I stepped into the time machine. Chapter 3. Getting into the restricted backstage area of Chronotonic HQ was easy. The security guard, who never said a single word to me, had clearly thought everything through. I wore an Access All Areas photographer's lanyard that he left at a pickup spot the night before the event, clearly having intercepted and kept it from a well-trusted professional who was really supposed to be capturing the event for posterity. I could only trust the guarantee the guard made in his final text message. It was simple, and it was crucial. All of the necessary security cameras would be taken out of commission in a way that would raise no alarm bells. When I successfully made it all the way into the backstage area, where I found the capsule-like machine that could change the world forever, I knew I had been right to put my faith in this desperate stranger. He held up his end of the bargain every inch of the way. For that, I hoped even more that the money I handed over will cover his wife's medical bills. When I stood there looking at the publicly unseen time machine, even if it was just for show, I decided I might drop a few extra dollars into his crowdfunding campaign. Because although I wasn't driven to that point only by money, I knew this scoop could bring me a whole lot of it. I wanted to change the world for the better. If I could change my life and my finances for the better while doing it, even better. One of the rules the guard stated in his message was that I couldn't touch anything or leave any kind of trail. That would risk us getting caught, he said. I knew that made sense, since any noticeable changes in the room could draw attention and maybe lead to a forensic investigation that would land us in hot water. I said I understood. I really did, too. But that was before I knew there was going to be a time machine in here. Dummy model or not, this was clearly going to be the centerpiece of their hugely hyped-up public presentation later in the day. How could I not get up close and personal? The fact that 4 small satellite dish-like objects were directed at the capsule made me think some kind of real demonstration might actually be in the cards. The dishes looked like they were going to focus some kind of energy on the machine, which was a slick, oval capsule, almost like a metallic silver cocoon, large enough for one person and no more. If there was a door, it was open, because I could see right in. The room didn't feel like an office or even a holding area. One telltale sign was the flooring, while another was the evidently temporary and movable wall on one side. I realized then that I wasn't in a backstage area as you would normally think of it. I was actually on the back of the stage. When the event got going, some of Chronotonic's telegenic and smooth-talking executives were bound to be standing right here next to the machine and facing out into the auditorium on the other side of the barrier. It was effectively a curtain, just a metallic one that would part like automatic doors to reveal this remarkable machine to the world. I don't know if one of them was planning to step inside and demonstrate something. I just knew I had to make the most of the 5 uninterrupted minutes the guard had promised me. As he stood on the other side of the door that brought me in here, I knew he was looking away to make sure no one was coming rather than monitoring me. I knew these minutes would be free of interruptions from him as well as everyone else. I could feel my heart beating fast, and I could even hear it over the faint sound of music coming from beyond the curtain-like barrier. I recognized the last line of the song's chorus. "This is our time, your time, no time like right now." Apt, but hardly a coincidence since the upcoming event was all about a breakthrough in time travel. The only surprise was that there was any music at all, what with the show not set to get underway for another few hours. I figured there might have been videographers or event planners on the other side of the door at this early hour, just like the photographer whose lanyard I used for security access was authorized to be there. It didn't freak me out to hear the music and know other people could be so close, though. For one thing, I was already so deep into the belly of the beast that there was no going back now. And for another, the enormity of what I was staring at didn't leave a lot of room for anything else in my mind. The only other sound I could hear was a large, ticking clock. It showed me I had under 4 minutes left, and I wasn't about to waste another second. I didn't feel bad about breaking the guard's rule. If he had the well-founded doubts I did, knowing what I've known about Chronotonic's executives for so long, he would have done the same thing. He did do his part, but it was time for me. Besides, as much as I hope his wife ends up okay, I wasn't about to spend too long worrying about bringing any employment trouble on a guy who worked for Chronotonic and was willing to sell them out. In my book, neither of those factors were winning him many points for being an upstanding guy. I didn't feel bad about the prospect of bringing great risks humanity's way either, on the small chance the machine might actually work. After all, it's not like it was me or no one. If I didn't go in, someone with less pure motives was going to do it soon enough. It's not like I was inventing a time machine. And if this genie was about to come out of the bottle, humanity would be better off with me making the wishes rather than Chronotonic's corrupt executives. I held my breath and stepped into the capsule. As soon as I did, a solid silver panel slid closed and fully cocooned me in the machine. I felt a natural sense of claustrophobia. Anyone would. I had no real concern about being trapped, though, knowing that the guard would probably come in a few minutes if I didn't emerge. Worst case, someone else would find me before long if he decided to bail. Needless to say, that wouldn't have been good. All I'm getting at is that I didn't feel any dread about being trapped for a long time. I actually felt excited. I felt like there might be more to the machine than I'd been thinking. For the first time, I felt that it might, well, work. I looked all around and saw a surprising lack of controls. Hollywood had taught me to expect dials, buttons, knobs, switches, lights, screens. Maybe an hourglass etched on the wall just for show. Definitely a warning sign or two. You know, everything that screams time machine. Instead, the only thing I saw was a single protrusion on the wall, almost like a zipper, which would clearly move horizontally along an inlet groove. It was almost all the way to the left. I took my phone out and took a bunch of photos. I then started recording a video right before I did the only thing anyone in my shoes would have done. I moved the object to the right. As soon as I did, I felt a shaking sensation and heard a loud whirring sound. "This is insane," I said, turning my phone's camera all around with my left hand as my right stayed on the controls. When the shaking got uncomfortable, just as I neared the extreme edge of the groove, my fingers couldn't keep hold of the small control interface any longer. A total white flash consumed me as soon as I let go. For an unknowable amount of time, that could just as easily have been 2 minutes or 2 seconds. It was like there was nothing at all, and I was at the center of the void. That's the only way I can describe it. I don't think I had to reopen my eyes because I don't think they were ever closed. But I felt a new clarity as the flash faded. The first thing I did was look at my phone. It was still recording. I ended that and checked the time. The same. Less than a minute had passed since I looked at the clock outside. Whatever had happened, it didn't look like I'd gone anywhere, or any when. I know that's not a word, but you know what I'm getting at. As I was looking at my phone, I heard a light hissing sound as the capsule's panel unsealed. Nothing but silence then came my way. I couldn't hear the familiar song anymore. I couldn't hear anything. When I turned around, I heard my heart beat like never before. The floor. The wall. The whole place. It was different. What looked like a pretty nondescript area of a corporate building just a few seconds earlier now seemed like the interior of a futuristic spaceship. Futuristic, I caught myself thinking. Holy shit. Could it really be true? Before I could step out for a better look, a new sound froze my feet to the spot. Alex White! A very resonant male voice boomed. Even with those two opening words, the tone dripped with excitement. I gulped, with several emotions trumping excitement for me. Trepidation for one. Is "what the hell have I just done" an emotion? Because if it is, it was definitely on top. Is it really you? The man continued. He then appeared in front of me, dressed as sharply as the room was appointed, and with a hairstyle and accent that were clearly not of my time. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Wonderful. We were hoping you would make it, he said, a smile crossing his face as he realized that yes, it was me. Make it? I stammered. He held out a hand to beckon me out of the machine. Yes, Alex, he replied, still smiling warmly. You made it. Welcome to the future. Chapter 4. How far? I asked. Through the shock of the incredible development, I was able to speak only in this short burst. 303 years, the man replied. I stared at him dumbly. I know, he nodded. I can only imagine what you're thinking. I won't dump everything on you, but let me begin by introducing myself. I am Custodio, leader of the community. We did not know you were coming, Alex. But we did know that if you came, it would be on this date. Not this specific year, I should clarify. The records from your time show that you entered the vessel on this date, but it was not known how many years into the future you instructed the vessel to carry you. I have waited here, on this date, beside the vessel's origin point, every year since I took over as the community's leader. My predecessors did too. Our hopes were fading, but they never died. You have no idea the breadth and depth of joy your arrival will bring when it becomes known. Wow. I was stunned. Not stunned in the sense that people typically use that word, but truly and utterly stunned. We also know you are a friend of Earth, Custodio continued. We are aware of your academic writings, your investigative work, and your undying respect for the sanctity of the natural world. The society of your time was one of savagery and selfish ignorance, but you were enlightened. Your words enlightened others too, Alex. With one daring action, you did more good for humanity than anyone who ever lived. Yeah, I'm delirious. That has to be it. I'm lying in a stupor on the floor of the machine, and all of this is in my mind. Custodio isn't real. None of this is real. It can't be. Can it? You attained a kind of posthumous fame after your disappearance, the man said. And your action in stepping into the vessel kicked off a chain of events that has led humanity to this elevated state. Hunger has been eradicated. The climate is more stable than any point in history. Crime is a relic of the past. You caused no problems in regard to any time paradoxes, and you actually ensured the inherently dangerous process of time travel would no longer be pursued. Tell me, did you ever think things could turn out so well? Is this real? I asked. Pinch yourself, Custodio replied. I did, hard, and you'd better believe I felt it. I took a deep breath in a bid to gather my thoughts. Glancing around the machine once more before stepping out, I caught sight of a countdown timer I hadn't noticed before. The clock stood at 1 hour, 58 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. Less than 2 hours. "Your reversion window," Custodio explained, seeing where I was looking. "We know from the records that the vessel was designed with that safety feature in place for its first usage, but the risks of making a return trip are great. Nevertheless, in theory, you could return to the same point in the past from which you departed, but only within that window. Once it expires, that's it." "So I can go home?" I asked. "The vessel was designed to be unidirectional," my host replied, evading the question. "It can move solely forward to avoid any paradoxes. When you came here, you effectively missed the intervening centuries. The events of those years happened, and they cannot be changed. Theoretically, you could go forward again, just as you could theoretically return to your own time. But there are great personal and broader risks in both scenarios." I could only imagine. I felt more than lucky to have survived what now seemed like an insanely reckless trip. But in my defense, it's not like I really expected anything to happen when I activated the machine. Hell, I didn't even fully realize that was what I was doing. All I knew was that I was still alive, and my phone still had an almost full battery. It was like no time passed within the machine. Like it somehow enveloped me in timelessness and dropped me into Custodio's world. The only other things I had with me are my dictaphone, which was recording, and some painkillers I needed for the stress headaches I was getting in the lead-up to the big day at Chronotonic HQ. I knew that going back in time would be a risk to myself, but I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the wider problems it could cause. Making the machine unidirectional made a lot of sense from my standpoint. A 2-hour window to revert back from the initial trip did too, since the untested machine could have landed its pilot in the wrong place. But going back to the past after directly interacting with someone from the future seemed like it could open all kinds of cans of worms. I decided that if I was safe with Custodio, and if things really have improved since I left my old present, returning wouldn't be a risk I could take. "So you said things have gotten better?" I pushed, stepping out of the machine and looking around at the impressive and suitably futuristic surroundings. No hunger, no climate instability, even no crime? Custodio smiled wider than ever. "Thanks in no small part to you. I will show you everything. Our people will be delighted to see you. As I said, your writings have been studied and your influence is great. You were venerated after your disappearance. That all occurred long before the birth of anyone who remains alive, of course. But the records are extensive. Your name became legend, Alex. You were a time traveler. That made your contemporaries look at your work and your ideas through new eyes. They saw you as a potential prophet who may have seen the future and presented its lessons without explicit reference." I swear it was all getting crazier by the minute. "You are still revered," he went on. "Come with me and you will see." I glanced in again at the countdown. "And I could be back here before that hits 0 if I have to?" Custodio held my gaze, a new kind of intensity in his own. "You could," he said. "But you will not want to. And Alex, I owe you honesty as well as gratitude. You deserve to know that regardless of how proud you are of the future your words and actions have shaped, and regardless of what you feel you have to do, you must not return to the past. Too much would be at stake. Everything good could be undone." I said nothing, feeling my breathing quicken as a fear response kicked in. Unlike when I first stepped into the machine and the door closed, this time I did feel trapped. "You are no savage of the past," Custodio said, smiling almost maniacally. "You are no selfish individualist, Alex. You belong with us, and with us you must stay. Chapter 5. Here's the thing. I didn't leave a whole lot behind in the past. $4,000 of debt is the first thing that comes to mind. I had no close family, no girlfriend, and definitely more acquaintances than friends. The picture Custodio painted of the future I arrived in made me reluctant to put all of it at risk, too. If my coming forward in time really did play a part in leading to a society free of problems that have blighted humanity for so long, how could I risk that? What kind of man would that make me? No one else traveled through time after your unplanned trip, Custodio said. Chronotonic dissolved very quickly. You went missing, presumed dead, and that happening on the day when they had planned to demonstrate their new machine was a fatal blow to the project. Your past and our future are truly distinct. For all intents and purposes, it is more like you have been in a coma than anything else. I hope you understand why this means you must stay here. Understand it? I mean, I did and I didn't. As much as anyone could really get their head around time travel, I think I did. With Custodio, I was standing in the only future that ever came to pass. There were no paradoxes. But if I went back, well, that could be different. Did the people who built the machine ever say what would happen if I survived and ever returned to the past? I asked. Custodio nodded. They firmly believed you would create a branch in time. Nothing here in our current reality would change. It couldn't, because everything that has led to this point has already happened. The good and the bad. It is all water under the bridge that brought us here. But the path that led here did not include your return from here. That is where the circular paradox lies. Returning now would create a new branching timeline, parallel to the one we are standing in. So I wouldn't be killing you and everyone else in this future? I asked. Custodio hesitated, then shook his head. No, but you would be introducing great risk of suffering and ecological damage in the new future of your past world. As things have played out, both Earth and humanity have enjoyed unprecedented calm and restoration. As I said, your departure set that in motion. Your return would not harm us, but it would create a new branch where your contemporaries and Earth itself could only end up worse off than they have in this natural course of history. I knew what he was getting at. If things were bad here, I would go back to give humanity a chance to follow a better path. But when coming clearly set us on a good path, that just doesn't make sense. Paradox or not, that would be almost as reckless as getting in the machine was in the first place. I had gotten lucky once, and I knew I couldn't push it again. As I followed Custodio away from the machine, I looked back at where it was located. There were no longer any dish-like objects directing energy towards it, as there had been in the 303-year-old layout. Was the machine always here, or did it leave the past and arrive here with me? I asked. It was always here, he confirmed. We moved it during refurbishment processes, but also with the base plate which we know holds the energy source. It can be moved. We simply chose to leave it here so you would feel some sense of familiarity if you did re-emerge. Every passing year made your arrival feel less likely, but we did not lose hope that you would one day reappear. I didn't have any real reply to that, so I internalized it and joined him in nearing the door. We emerged into a hallway that felt vaguely familiar in layout to the one I'd walked down with the security guard who got me in. There's simply no way of describing how bizarre it is to consider that all of that happened both a few minutes and a few centuries before I stepped into the machine. I tried to shake that from my mind, feeling like my brain would explode if I thought about it for too long. A series of windows caught my eye where there had been none in the past. I looked out and saw a large expanse of buildings, most of them low, with a few gleaming towers rising up from the ground. Everything looked pristine and, well, futuristic. The old city was gone, which shouldn't have been a surprise given how much time passed while I was on the way here. "This is the community's food and energy production center," Custodio explained. Wow, I thought to myself. If that was where they grew the food, I couldn't imagine how cool the rest of the city and the world as a whole must look. "This way," Custodio went on. "We're almost outside. I will take you to our community living quarters." He pointed to a door on the opposite side of the hallway from the windows. "So how many people live here now?" I asked as we neared it. "The Food and Energy Production Center you just saw supports a sustainable population of 11,000, he said. As we stepped outside, I paused. I faced Custodio in shock as he closed the door behind me. I hadn't even looked out yet, having been focused on him for a reply, and then stunned by what came my way. 11,000? I echoed in disbelief. There used to be 4 million people in this city. Custodio smiled. "Conquering the scourge of overpopulation was the linchpin in delivering progress and harmony across all spectra of life," he gleefully replied. My spine stiffened. I finally looked away from Custodio and out to the city, or community, as he kept calling it. Doing so only made me feel even worse. There was almost nothing. Several huge buildings, evidently comprising community living quarters, Custodio had mentioned, dominated my field of view. They were brutalist structures, having nothing in common with the slick design of the production area on the other side of the building we just left. Each looked like a dystopian prison block, rising high into the sky and with countless tiny doors visible like rows of lockers in a gym. "Is this some self-contained commune, separate from the rest of the world?" I asked, hoping to hell the answer was yes. "No," my host stated. "This is the human world, Alex. Concentrating humanity within one ecologically designed community has allowed us to leave the rest of the planet to heal and thrive without our poisonous intervention. Just like your dissertation suggested, we have you to thank for all of this." As that revelation hit like a hammer to the heart, only one thought dominated my mind. What had I done? Chapter 6. "Everyone is here?" I asked. "In those buildings, those tiny little single rooms behind each door?" Custodio nodded. "Single-person dwellings ensure that members of our community can remain focused on their work. Everyone has a role in ensuring the smooth functioning of the systems that ensure the continued stability of our planet. Familial and romantic bonds are a distraction we have quelled and transcended. We can now focus on serving Earth rather than each other." I said nothing. I didn't even know what to think. "I know this element will be the hardest for you to accept," Custodio rightly acknowledged. "Unlike other influential ecological philosophers, you did not write about the desirable abolition of the family unit. I did expect you to be more outwardly pleased about our victory in the fight against overpopulation, though. You most certainly wrote about that." "Yeah," I reflected, "when I was 18. And believe me, I was definitely no philosopher. There's also a pretty huge gap between 11 billion and 11,000. "So there's really no one else?" I gulped in discomfort, looking out at the community's ugly living quarters. "There's nothing else?" "Tiny numbers of regional overseers," Custodio shrugged dismissively. Hundreds in total, stationed at our monitoring stations in distant regions, so that we can continue to serve Earth and its environment as optimally as possible. We keep our interventions at the lowest possible level, but measurement is important. 4 overseers are setting off in a few days to replace a crew which was lost to predation. Their station has by far the highest turnover rate of any. Predation? I gasped. Are your people living in tents? Of course not, Alex. But Earth's creatures take what they need. It is not our place to enter their habitat and exert dominion and violence. Don't you recognize those words? They were your own. You wrote about humans being Earth's only needlessly destructive species, who should not be able to decide which others live or die. Our extraterritorial, non-interventionist policy is based on those tenets. Earth's creatures are not our enemies, they are our responsibility. This whole thing is getting crazier and crazier. I do recognize those words about exerting dominion and violence over wild animals, but I can't believe Custodio has really internalized my teenage writings to this extent. I also can't believe his regional overseers are left to fend for themselves with no defense against dangerous predators. Why not just raze this community to the ground and kill yourselves, if all you care about is keeping Earth in the most pristine possible state? I blurted out. If you value humanity below everything else, why are you here? Why go from 11 billion to 11,000 and not just go the whole damn way? Knowing how much weight Custodio had already put in my words, I guess I should have thought before speaking. I couldn't help it, though, faced with the madness I was hearing about. Fortunately, he didn't find anything to agree with in my latest comments. Instead, Custodio looked at me like I was the crazy one. The time travel must have confused your thinking, he said. You aren't seeing things clearly. A small number of right-thinking humans directing themselves to preserving Earth's environment is a net positive. We are taking every necessary step to protect this planet we have been gifted, and to pass it on in even better shape for future generations. Intergenerational justice, just like you wrote about. But in a world like this, future generations will be just as miserable as everyone in those buildings must be right now, I snapped. You're focusing so hard on the health of the planet you're passing on, you've lost all sight of the kind of world you're passing on. I didn't know how else to phrase it, and I couldn't believe Custodio was still staring at me so blankly. In focusing so much on the vague and all-encompassing notion of protecting Earth like some kind of religious imperative, he and his contemporaries really had lost sight of everything else. I left a world where the pursuit of profit seemed like a religious imperative for far too many, with no thought at all given to safeguarding the natural environment. The problem was, I arrived in a world where the cure seemed even worse than the disease. As overcorrections go, it's hard to see how things could have gone any further. I felt sick to my stomach to think that my action of stepping into the time machine, and even my teenage writings, had played a part in leading humanity to this point. But it was no longer time to lament what I'd done. It was time to think about what I could still do. And there was only one action that could give me any chance of stopping this hellscape from becoming humanity's destiny. Even if I couldn't undo the past, since everything leading to this shit show had already happened, and the best I could do was create a new branch of time, I couldn't let this become humanity's ultimate destiny. No way. Right then, I knew what I had to do. Come what may, I had to go back. Chapter 7. Standing outside a door with no visible handle, I knew I couldn't get back to the time machine without Custodio's assistance. Our relationship was at risk of souring, with my unequivocal comments and judgments clearly causing some friction, so I knew I had to change tack. We are passing on a world of stability and ecological harmony, Custodio stated, somewhat defensively replying to my last point. Isn't this what you wanted, Alex? No, I wanted to scream. Of course it wasn't. But I held my tongue for the greater good. This really is a lot to take in, I said, buying myself some time. I didn't have a lot of it, what with the machine's reversion countdown well underway, but I had to take a moment. Custodio nodded, his expression softening. Carefully, he reached out and placed an awkward hand on my shoulder. How quickly did things start changing? And how? I asked, keen to gather information. I had to get home to the past, and I had to take some tangible knowledge with me, so I knew clearly what kind of developments to guard against. It took a long time for positive change to develop, Custodio replied. At first, the discovery of time travel and the hysteria surrounding your disappearance led to a lot of existential debates. Chronotonic's demise was a massacre for the stock market and investment funds. So much had been tied up in it, and everyone knew sentiment would never recover. A lot came out about insider trading and corruption at the very top levels. It brought down governments, plural, and the regional instability and power vacuums that followed that chaos led to major military conflicts. Things were grim. People began to hope for your return as a prophet from the future. And like I mentioned earlier, some people started to wonder if you had always been a prophet. A belief developed and spread that your dissertation on sustainable living was a blueprint from the future that you had left behind as a roadmap to take us there. Not everyone believed that, but once time travel was proven as a viable possibility, it is understandable that people began to wonder whether it had been utilized more extensively. Do you know anything specific about the corruption? I asked. I had suspicions. There were some bills going through the system and some people in high places that I didn't trust. Custodio replied right away. Oh, yes, the Taylor revelations were monumental. We study the past and make sure it stays alive in the minds of our community's leadership. It is important for us to remember the savagery you emerged from, Alex, to ensure we never return to it. I pushed for some more details and quickly got them. With my dictaphone recording in my pocket, I wanted as much information about the corruption as possible, so that if I made it back to the past, I could call it out. When Custodio ran out of detailed information, I moved on. So how long until the lowest point, before this community arose and everything like hunger and crime were tamed? I asked. I very consciously chose words that made it sound like I fully approved of everything, hoping Custodio would gloss over my earlier qualms and dismiss them as the result of a foggy mind like he initially suggested they might be. 70 years, give or take, he replied instantly. And in those words I saw in my window. I would have to do my best acting to pretend I believed what I was about to say, but I had to do it. Custodio, I have an idea. It is risky for me, but I think it is good for Earth. Your focus is protecting the planet. If I was to return to the past and create a new branch, nothing here would change. Your good work would remain. But I would be able to initiate positive changes with all of this knowledge you have given me, saving both humanity and Earth from 70 years of suffering that might allow an even better future than this by the time 300 years have passed. I will be taking the risk of leaving this utopian world in the hope of facilitating one like it even sooner in the alternative past, but I believe it is my duty. We have talked about intergenerational justice. I believe that when I have the ability to go back and improve things for the intervening generations, even if it is on a new branch of time, I have a responsibility to do it. Keeping a straight face as I called this hellish reality a utopian world took every ounce of effort I could muster, and all I could then do was hold my breath to see if Custodio had bought it. His eyes narrowed in thought. Establishing a second branch would effectively create a backup Earth, he mused. And this is the only chance we will ever have to do it. If this is your decision, I will accept it. You must first address our people, though, who have waited so long in the hope you would join us. We don't have long, I said. The reversion countdown is already... As I spoke, I was suddenly and roughly interrupted by the sight of a woman rushing towards me. And despite what Custodio had said, she didn't look delighted to see me. She didn't look angry at me either, but despite her well-put-together appearance, there was an unmissable desperation in her demeanor. Custodio stepped in front of me. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked. With no crime, there were no police or security guards to protect him. The woman didn't seem like a real threat, but she did seem unpredictable. And of all the things she could have wanted, I would never have guessed what she was about to say. Chapter 8.
"It's you! You're here!"
the woman panted.
"Please, go forward again. My son is sick. We need a treatment. The future has to have an answer. Alex White, you are the only one who can help. I'm begging you. I am begging you to save my son."
Custodio, standing between me and this desperate mother, turned to me and shook his head dismissively. "I apologize for this, Alex," he said. "The biological drive can be stubbornly strong. Birthers can retain emotional bonds to their offspring even after years of separation, and despite the best efforts of our renunciation ceremonies. We are making improvements in this area, but it is not easy."
"Please,"
the woman went on, addressing her pleas solely to me.
"You have to help him."
It was probably a good thing that I didn't have a chance to respond to Custodio's comments about birthers and renunciation ceremonies, because I wouldn't have known where to start. "What's wrong with your son?" I asked.
"He has a fever."
My eyes narrowed. "Just a fever? And you can't treat it?"
"With what?"
the desperate mother replied in confusion. Suspiciously, I turned to Custodio. "Our doctors heal the earth," he plainly stated. "When nature determines that an individual is too weak, it is not our place to disagree." "No," I interrupted. Enough was enough. "You're the one who said a controlled human population is good for the planet. Even in your myopic worldview that only cares about that, how does it make sense not to make basic medical interventions? It takes way more resources to raise another child to the same age than it would to help this one get better. There's no logic to it." Not for the first time, it felt bizarre to have to twist what should have been an obvious point into something that would get through to Custodio. Intervening to help a sick child is something the so-called savages of the past would do without thinking. Here, the only way to make it make sense in his mind was to paint it as a way to help the planet. More and more, I could see the extent of the sickness that had taken hold. I was vocal in the past about how far too many people cared about the natural environment, only insofar as they could exploit its resources for commercial enrichment. But now, in this hellish future where ecological fanaticism had been taken to its extreme, society had gone so far the other way that human life itself was only valued insofar as it could be seen to benefit the planet. Only in that moment did I truly realize how fiercely freedom and the sanctity of life had to be protected. I realized they did not exist, much less persist, automatically or by default, as people in my past reality had come to think. Throughout almost all of human history, and even across much of the world during what I knew as the present, freedom was rare. Freedom was the exception, not one or another form of tyranny. The only thing truly novel about the crazy world I arrived in was that humanity as a whole had subjugated itself in slavish devotion to a specious notion of environmental guardianship. This wasn't one group, nation, or culture dominating another. This was humanity as a whole voluntarily stepping down the pecking order and reducing itself to a second-class status. "That's a very interesting point," Custodio pondered. "Perhaps you are right, Alex. Perhaps selected medical interventions would be for the best, under a utilitarian and resource-driven consideration. Again, I could hardly believe this was a position he had to arrive at. I will look into formulating some medicines of the past by repurposing some machinery in our food and green fertilizer production facilities. The old records and new technologies we possess should make that fairly straightforward.
But what about my son?
Cried the poor woman, whose interruption had kick-started this whole discussion. Here, I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out the painkillers I had in there, which had been helping with my headaches in the stressful days before Chronotonic's big event. These will reduce a mild fever. The woman looked at the small tube like it was a gift from God.
Have you already been to the future? She asked.
These are actually from the past, I explained. You might have been told we were savages, but we did a few things right. Without pushing any further, she thanked me and rushed away with the pills. When it was once again just me and Custodio, he turned to face me. When I introduce you to the masses before your return, please don't say anything that will cause confusion. I will explain your need to return to the past. Your presence will delight them, but it is important that your words do not undermine our social fabric. Do you understand? Yes, I said. It wasn't a lie either, because I did understand. I didn't agree, and I wasn't going to play along, but I still understood. You said the time machine can be moved along with the base plate, I went on. I would like it out here so everyone can see. The visual will be a powerful image to link the past and present in their minds. It will be good for everyone. If he had pushed me to explain why it would be good, I would have been shit out of luck. Fortunately, he didn't. A great idea, he replied. I will gather a team of assistants to help us move it, and I will call for the masses to assemble here. You do not have long, Alex. He was right about that, and as we stepped back into the building, I ran over two options in my mind. The key thing was that I wanted the capsule within my sight and within my reach. Being on the other side of a locked door was no good. Back in the building, my first option was dashing into it and going back to the past right away. That would give me a chance to take steps to make sure humanity wouldn't be doomed to this hellish future, at least in the new branch my return would create. The second option, though, was the new one I couldn't shake. This future, so far the only one, but soon to be a branch I would never see again, was utterly terrible. But even worse than that, it was my fault. Without my actions and writings, things wouldn't be like this. The great cities and nations wouldn't have been rewilded to satisfy some philosophical goal of environmental purity. The population wouldn't have been curtailed to 1/1,000,000th of its zenith. People wouldn't be forced to live in single-person dwellings and left to die of easily curable ailments. With all of that in mind, there was no way I could abandon this branch without making an effort to put things right. I felt like this future was already too far gone for me to stay and devote my efforts to leading a course correction. Undoing 3 centuries of brutal totalitarian damage on this society's collective psychology was way more than I could handle. Going back to my old present was the best chance of enabling a free and prosperous future for humanity. But I knew I could make some difference here. I also knew that standing at the edge of the time machine while I addressed the crowd would enable me to speak without worrying that I could irk Custodio to the point of not allowing me to return home. I could say my piece and leave. My conscience would never be truly clear, but at least I would know I tried. Because sometimes, trying is all you can do. Chapter 9. I couldn't count to 11,000 without losing track, but I didn't have to. Looking out at the sea of humanity that was waiting outside when we emerged with the time machine and its dense metallic baseplate, I knew I was talking to the entire community. Their silence was positively eerie. It seemed like individuality and spontaneity had been totally stripped away along with the things I already knew about, like personal freedom and familial bonds. One voice did rise before I addressed the crowd, though. It belonged to the woman from only 30 or so minutes earlier, who was now rushing forward to thank me again for the medicine.
"He is already responding,"
she said, almost sobbing in relief. Naturally, I was delighted to hear that. The evident emotion she was just as naturally feeling left me in little doubt that the community's leadership's bizarre bid to fully eliminate biologically driven connection was an unachievable goal. I didn't have to go to the future to know that undermining the family unit was a favored tactic of all kinds of totalitarian systems, which saw it as a threat to their sole authority and couldn't tolerate people being more loyal to something other than the system itself. Meeting Custodio and his fellow future dwellers certainly cemented it in my mind as something to look out for, though. I hugged the woman and encouraged her to return to the crowd, which she did. There was no barrier, just a neat row of impeccably obedient people. Too obedient, really, I figured. Eliminating crime is no bad thing, but it seemed like that was achieved in Custodio's community by practically eliminating the human spirit altogether. True to his word, Custodio then stepped forward to formally introduce me to the crowd and tell them that I would soon be returning to the past, where I would create a new branch that would have no effect on this timeline. I raised my hand to acknowledge an applause that seemed perfunctory rather than warm. It really did seem increasingly like emotions had been trained out of people, with only a desperate mother's undying urge to protect her child having broken through during my time in the future. No one even asked for any more details about the branch, or the past, or anything else. They were just so passive. It also struck me that Custodio had been over-egging things about how delighted people would be to see me. I had little doubt that he was privy to more information about the past, and about ongoing societal interventions than the masses, who seemed to live quiet and dull lives of service, with no spark or sense of individual purpose. "I'm glad I made it here," I began, taking over as Custodio handed me the floor. My words were amplified by an impressively powerful public address system. There were a lot of things I didn't like about the past. To me, it was the present, obviously. But what's important is that we're all here right now. Because I have to tell you guys, this future isn't as perfect as I would have hoped either. I looked at Custodio and was ready to hurry into the machine if I saw any sign of major annoyance on his face. He had already proven to be expressive and seemed somehow more fully human than the servile class that made up the crowd, but even he surprised me by looking rather unmoved by my opening comment. I didn't want to lecture everyone. It wouldn't work, for one thing. All I wanted to do was at least try to open their eyes to what had been lost. "Your world is safe," I told them. "The planet is thriving. Those are both good things. I don't know how much you really know about life in the past, or if you'll still use any of our phrases, but I have to tell you guys that this society is the biggest case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater that I could ever imagine. Sure, things weren't perfect back then. We took the planet for granted, and a lot of people were stuck in lives of servitude to enrich others. But there were basic, fundamental things that we took for granted that you don't have anymore." I saw some expressions change in the crowd. Custodio's still didn't. "When we got sick, we could get better," I went on. "When we had children, we could keep them. At least in my country, we could live with whoever we wanted. We could do whatever kind of work we wanted, too, as long as it was within the rules we all agreed to live by. Like I said, we were sometimes reckless with the environment that sustained us. But we were changing things. And I'm going back because I think we can find solutions without losing ourselves, which is definitely something that happened on humanity's way here. You were all born into this and don't know any different. But you have to believe me when I say that so much has been lost. So much! When I paused, a male voice called from the crowd. You could keep your children? That was allowed? You could choose your work? Another asked. Yes and yes, I replied. In my day, a lot of people saw human life as cheap and saw environmental destruction as the cost of doing business. Money came first. I don't know where money fits in here, and I'm kind of guessing the answer is not at all. But the problem with both worlds is that the sanctity of humanity has to come first. It shouldn't come below money like it did in the past, and it shouldn't come below an obsession with ecological purity like it does here. There's a middle ground, and it's not too late, or too early, to start moving that way. You've said enough, Custodio quietly interjected. I was on the very edge of the capsule, able to step in at a moment's notice, so I wasn't too concerned by his evident displeasure. I didn't want to push things too far, though, and I was running out of things to say anyway. If the leadership has kept the past from you, you can see some of it on here, I said, lifting my phone from my pocket and holding it in the air. Images and videos of my everyday life. You can see what you're missing. The battery won't last forever, but I'm sure you have to have some kind of technology to access the data. And you'll have at least 8 hours anyway. I threw my unlocked phone high towards the crowd, which was dense enough for me to know it would be safely caught. Sure enough, it was. The collected mass of humanity reconfigured around the central figure who had caught it, an illuminating relic of the past and potential catalyst for a better future. Custodio stepped towards me, looking more than displeased, and I took that as my cue to leave. Freedom isn't easy, I told the crowd, delivering one last line before taking a hopeful leap into the past. But believe me, it's better than this. The capsule's door closed behind me as I stepped in. With the countdown dangerously close to 0, I touched the zipper-like control interface and immediately activated the machine. A flash consumed me. I was gone. Chapter 10. As soon as the flash subsided, I knew I was back. At least, I knew I was in my own time, where this all started inside Chronotonic HQ. But did I ever really go anywhere? And if I did, how long was I gone? Almost 2 hours, like I spent in the future? Or was it all in my head? Was I back there? Or was I still there? I instinctively reached into my pocket to check the time on my phone. I tried to, anyway. But the phone wasn't there. A smile immediately crossed my face. No phone, no painkillers. I left them in the future, which means I really was there. The capsule's door opened a few seconds later. As it did, I heard a familiar song playing faintly. This is our time, your time, no time like right now. My smile grew even wider. Almost no time had passed, certainly less than the length of the song. Before stepping out of the time machine, I reached for the delicate zipper-like control and deliberately bent it so that it couldn't be used. I didn't have a strong plan for what I was going to do now that I was back in my own time, but I definitely wanted to make sure Chronotonic's event didn't go well. 2 parallel branching futures is more than enough, and one thing I'll be doing now that I'm back is making sure time travel never takes off. That's secondary to making sure humanity doesn't go down the dystopian route of self-subjugation under the auspices of ecologically conscious decision-making, of course. But it could be just as important to ensuring a safe and stable future. I glanced up at the clock on the wall as I stepped out and saw that it had indeed only been a few minutes since I last saw it. I knew I would never fully understand what I'd experienced, but I knew for damn sure that I really had experienced it. Well, 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 a voice greeted me. Beat me to it, huh? I recognized the voice as belonging to Jill Bentley, a fellow young journalist who I used to count as a friend, but who didn't back me up when I needed an ally. She's since stepped on my toes more than once. "Did you pay a guard to get in here too?" I asked.
"4 large,"
Jill said. She was wearing an all-access photographer's lanyard, just like my own. I grinned. The guard had double-sold access, taking Jill's money and letting her into the room even when I was already here. In a way, I can only respect the audacity. I won't be adding anything extra to his crowdfunding campaign, though, now that Jill and I have collectively given him double what he needed for his wife's medical bills. "Sucks to be you, then," I shrugged at Jill. "You missed the boat. This is one scoop you won't be stealing." She looked at me intently.
"You're not seriously going to stand there and tell me it worked, are you?"
With a huge decision to make and no time to make it, I found myself instinctively shaking my head. It's a bust. But hey, can I borrow your phone for a second to make a call? Some kind of interference in there fried mine, and I'd written down some questions I want to ask at the event. I had specific names I wanted to bring up. My roommate will be able to access them on my computer. I'll owe you one." Jill eyed me suspiciously. This was a double play that came to me on the spot. On one hand, I mentioned my phone being fried because I didn't really want her to go into the time machine and take any photos of her own. I didn't want her to leak anything ahead of the event, which might lead to a cancellation, since the event was an opportunity for a live and very public expose of the corruption Custodio told me about. More importantly, the phone gambit would enable my plan for that expose to take place without my direct involvement. I didn't want to put my head above the parapet and be the one to call out the corruption. I knew I had to keep my profile as low as possible, hoping the guards' camera-disabling procedures will prevent anyone from finding out I was responsible for breaking the machine's control system, let alone that I used it to time travel. I knew Chronotonic wouldn't last long enough for any meaningful investigation anyway, and that no one would want to be associated with the brand once the truth came out. I opted to put my faith in Jill's cutthroat nature, knowing that she would steal my scoop and bring up the names I mentioned on the phone before I had the chance. She handed me her phone, struggling to contain a grin.
"You will owe me," she said.
I knew she was going to stab me in the back. What she didn't know was that I was counting on it. People like Jill, and to a much greater extent the corrupt politicians and executives I knew she would soon expose, only ever care about money. They had no thought for the consequences for anyone else, and in many cases for Earth as a whole. On the other hand, people like my former 18-year-old self only care about abstract notions of so-called environmental responsibility and the like. They, or we, too often gave no thought to the suffering that policies intended to remedy our missteps could bring about. The only sane path is in the middle. Like I told the crowd in the future, humanity should not come below money or anything else. Humanity has to come first. Today and always, it has to. When I took the phone from Jill, I thanked her and called my own number. It went to voicemail, obviously, since I had just left it 303 years in the future. I then pretended to talk to my roommate and repeated aloud, supposedly for confirmation, the names of the executives and politicians Custodio had mentioned. I also repeated the names of the bills they were working on to divert even more funds toward Chronotonic, and away from other companies and projects that could actually help the environment in the way Chronotonic hollowly promised to do. Jill could then hardly contain her glee and tried to snatch her phone back from my hand instantly. I rapidly erased the call so she wouldn't see I had called my own number, then handed it over.
"Neither of us was ever in here," she said.
"That goes without saying," I told her. "I just wish I'd gotten something worthwhile for the money, but I guess the only thing the guard promised was access." Jill was smiling in the knowledge that she had gotten something, and she left without another word. I left alongside her, handing the silent and entrepreneurial security guard his lanyard before disappearing via the exit route he had suggested in advance. For fear of something coming up about what I did in the supposedly secure area, I didn't attend the big event a few hours later. I instead watched from home just a few miles away as two chronotonic executives took to the stage and talked about recent developments in time travel research. One even stepped into the capsule, visible to the crowd with the curtain-like barrier parted all the way. The man made no reference to any damage or technical hiccup, but I could sense there had been a late change of plan. No one else suspected anything. Things were going well for Chronotonic, with a promise of a live demonstration in a matter of weeks, until the question and answer session. To my total lack of surprise, the first question came from Jill Bentley. Her name wasn't called, but that wasn't going to stop her. She fired a metaphorical torpedo onto the stage by naming the individuals I had mentioned in my fake phone call. She had pieced things together in the intervening hours, too, just like I had, and her swing sure as hell didn't miss. The accusations of high-level political and financial corruption were blunt, they were public, and they were dynamite. The executive at the heart of it all was standing on stage right beside the capsule. It couldn't have been more perfect. The scumbag looked like he had seen a ghost as soon as the words were out of Jill's mouth. The event ended early. Jill was soon on every news station, lapping it up and no doubt wondering how I could be so damn stupid as to have given her the leads. A rocket had just been strapped to her career. It could have been me, of course, but bringing too much attention on myself would have limited my ability to safely and subtly influence the course of events based on what I saw in the future. I'm not claiming to be a selfless saint, and I know there's an argument that I should tell everyone everything, but I don't see it that way. And I guess I would argue that old Alex does maybe deserve a little credit for letting Jill have the win and staying in the shadows. And right now, that's where I am. I'm committing this to text 6 hours after the live event, with trading already suspended on Chronotonic stock and the course of history, future history, already altered. Now that the capsule has been publicly revealed, I don't know if I could prevent humanity from ever successfully pursuing time travel, even if I devoted my life to it. All I know today is that Chronotonic is in the well-deserved process of biting the dust. That alone is going to be good for Earth, since ecologically minded investors will no longer be throwing good money at a crazy and irresponsible bet. Instead, we can keep pursuing incremental and cooperative progress to ensure a safe and stable world for all. Now that I've seen what can happen if a society gets too caught up in seeing itself as an evil scourge on a planet whose sanctity it comes to view as more important than human life itself, I'm also going to be mindful of speaking up when I see anyone, well-intentioned or not, trying to lead us in that direction. Society needs more nuanced conversations and more diligence in all areas, and I'll use the knowledge I've gained from my incredible trip to try and steer things the right way. The burden is mine, and I will bear it as best I can. Freedom isn't easy, but good things never are. Thank you for listening to A Savage in the Future, written by Craig A. Falconer, narrated by Stephen Barnett. Text and production copyright Craig A. Falconer, 2023.